All right. So it's really nice to be back here in St. Gallen. The first time I was here was back in 2007 for the symposium. Back then I was much younger, probably much more beautiful as well, when I think about it. Perhaps nowadays I'm a bit more like that middle-aged old skinny man that Laura was talking about earlier. Anyways, I spent the past 10 years working as a tech entrepreneur in Sweden. And the past 6 years I've been working on I guess you could say, a more subtle kind of revolution, which is the revolution in recruitment, or rather kind of the bridge between education and employment. Because if you think of it, many of the issues that we currently see being expressed in the elections in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and probably all of Europe, are all related somehow to access to opportunities. And I would argue that the failure to provide people with opportunities is the one promise that the free world has failed to deliver on to the people. But why do people expect opportunities in the first place? Well, in order to understand this, we need to go back a bit in time, to the 19th century. And back in the 19th century, the idea of a public access to education came about. And this book that you can see up here, I got it from my grandfather. It's a description of the Volksschule, or the people's school. And this idea that everyone should have access to education, that wasn't completely clear back then. Because the hierarchies were in place, you had the elites and they were very happy with their castles and their fancy parties and all that stuff. But they thought it was a good idea to provide everyone with basic education for a few reasons. So one of the reasons were to qualify people for society. Another one was to control the social order and to start kind of building this social contract between the people and the government. And the third reason was to build good citizens. So essentially what this social contract said was that if you invest your time and your energy and your trust into this system, we guarantee that you will have access to opportunities, to jobs, and that you will also get to share the welfare that we create together in this country. But furthermore, with that promise came another promise that hadn't been around before, which was the promise of social mobility. That it wouldn't matter that you were born into a role. It didn't matter that you were born a peasant, because you would still get access to the education and you could still make that rags to riches journey that resonates very deeply within people. So for years and years, this system was built up in a lot of countries. I took part of it myself. There is a lot of students in here. You're in this right now. And this is my diploma. I actually managed to graduate with a diploma. That was an effort. But it's interesting that back then, when the system was built up, the idea was that you were educating yourself and then you had one job for your entire lifetime, or maybe two jobs, but you were supposed to have a limited number of jobs. But today, young people are expected to have 4 jobs by the age of 30, and expected to have 20 jobs within a lifetime. And this has led to a fundamental kind of restructuring of the way that education is done in the world. We're moving from learning at one point in life to lifelong learning, which is like going in and out in education throughout life. And to highlight what this has done to the recruitment industry, because what happens is that people learn in different ways, through different means. There are online courses available these days. You can do internships, and you can even be self-taught. A lot of the best developers in the world that are hired by companies, they don't have an education. They've taken the hard way of learning. But in the United Kingdom, if you graduate from a university, there are 39 other graduates that are competing for each and every job, on average. If you're going into one of the big famous Swedish tech companies, then you're competing against 450 other people for that job. But my favorite example of how the recruitment process is completely upside down is the government job in India that had 2.3 million people applying for 380 positions, 6,250 people per position. How do you stand out in that crowd? You know, ooh, I got a pink CV. I'll send in a pressy or something. I hope they sort of see me in the pile. This is my folder. We all have one. My folder of applications, CVs, personal letters, letters of motivations, begging for getting a job. So what I want to challenge is kind of this whole process of how we match people between education and work. It's like, do we feel that this is still fair? Do we feel that this is still transparent? And do we feel that it's a meaningful way of spending our time and applying for jobs? But what's perhaps even more interesting is what happens to the social contract and the guarantee that you're getting a job after your education, when you are in fact getting in line and with hundreds, even thousands of others in order to get to that one opportunity. So we heard a bit earlier today about the robots, and this small robot here is not going to steal our jobs because it's too small, I think. It's going to steal our circuit boards, maybe. But I mean, whether the robots steal our jobs or not, because they might, you know, there might be fewer jobs available in future. But it might also be the case, which we are more certain of, is that the technology is changing the pace that jobs are being replaced. So that the jobs that are available 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now will be vastly different from the jobs that are available today, which also increases the kind of velocity that people will switch between professions, and also the need for education and upgrading your skills throughout your career. So now that we know that recruitment is an awful process, like the way it works, why don't we see how we can fix it? Because if people are waiting in line, why can't we just make that process more enjoyable and more fun even, rewarding? Perhaps we can even turn the application process into an educational process so that you learn as you go. I think the first step towards this is just to recognize for companies and organizations that not everyone has the traditional set of skills. So in order to pick up the people with a non-traditional background, the process of identifying, finding, and giving a stage to those people and a path into the company is crucial. So imagine if you have a job ad, and instead of saying that we're looking for an engineer that has these and that skills, blah, 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 send in your CV and your personal letter, you can apply with by demonstrating your skills. Show us what you can do. And secondly, if we entertain the idea that we turn this process into an educational process, imagine if you apply for a job at Google and they kind of take you through all kind of hops and hoops, and then you end up in the top 5% of that process, but you don't get the job. Wouldn't it be great if that would be a merit that you could bring into the next process? So that you could build your skills and you could build your profile as you go. And why not build your portfolio? In this example, a design company was looking for satellite designers and engineers. So they simply said, show us what you can do, design us the satellite. 1,800 people designed satellites, and of course only a handful was selected for the opportunity in the end. But all the others got a nice piece of work for their portfolio that they could then bring on to the next application. So it becomes more of a learning process. And it's interesting how companies speak more and more about employees as rock stars or superstars. This is actually my company. We are 60 rock stars. we always go to Finland for karaoke. That's where all the magic happens, like in case you need some karaoke in your life at some point. But companies speak more and more about rock stars, right? And I think that this is pretty characteristic for the era that we live in. The world's most popular TV format is American Idol. It works in every culture, in every country, everywhere in the world. Is there a Swiss Idol? Anyone here participated? But it works, in Saudi Arabia, in China, in Sweden, in the United States. And the reason for that is that it taps into something much deeper in ourselves, which is the idea that anyone can become a star. And that is also the idea behind the social contract of education, that anyone can make the rags to riches journey. And if we elaborate a bit more on this, if you consider the United States of America, United States is built on the idea that if you're talented, if you're skilled and willing to work hard enough, you should be able to achieve social mobility. But I think the question is, are we ready to take this idea to the world? And can we? And by doing this, can we open up so that everyone will have access and truly have equal access to opportunities? Thank you very much. Thanks.